If you go to some parts of the internet, people will tell you data science is white hot and there's never been a better time to be in it. You go to other places in the internet, people will tell you data science is dying. So what in the world is actually going on? Keep watching because we're going to break that all down. I'm Richard and this is Richard on Data. So I just did a video addressing a notion out there that I fundamentally disagree with. And that's this idea that generative AI is on the cusp of replacing everybody's job who's currently working with data in some way. But there's a ton more rumblings and concerns in the data world than just that. Part of it being the recent tech layoffs, which have really been going on for about the last 2 years now. But then there's also this fascinating idea floating around, which is that actually data science is on the decline, whereas data analyst and engineering roles are on the up and up. So we're going to get into all of this in this video. Before that, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. 70% of those of you who watch my content are not subscribed, so if you can take a moment to do that, I greatly appreciate it. Then also just take a fraction of a second to smash the like button for the YouTube algorithm. Alright, so we're going to start with one of the things that people care about the most, which is salary. So to do this, I went to Indeed and I dug into the salary ranges for 4 different roles. That's data analyst, data scientist, data engineer, and machine learning engineer. So all the numbers that I'm going to give you are from jobs in the United States, but also obviously keep in mind that an average is not going to tell an entire story and there's tons of variables that go into it. So salary is obviously going to be influenced by things like years of experience, the region that you're in, the industry that you're working in, all kinds of other things. The idea here is really just to rank these 4 positions and just give some sort of comparison between them. Let's start with data analyst. Now, this is as of February of 2024. So you're looking at an average base salary of $76,879. Now keep in mind the range here could be as low as $49,047 or as high as $120,503. Second up is data scientist. Average here is $123,668, which is higher than even that high range of data analyst. There are some reports here of as low as $79,811, but some of these also go all the way up to $191,623. Now, very close to that is data engineer. Average for this is very slightly higher at $127,322. But then if you're fortunate and or talented enough to call yourself a machine learning engineer, you're probably working at a tech company if that's the case. But you're looking at an average of a whopping $161,766 on average. And in fact, as you can see from the high end and from some of the companies listed below, 200,000 isn't out of the question. Now, another very important thing to keep in mind here is that these positions are not going to be your positions for your entire life. So for instance, it's very common in a lot of companies to have senior level or sometimes even principal level positions. And the ranges that you're looking at the senior or principal level are going to be much higher. Even with those, you're probably realistically only looking at the first 10 to 15 years or so of your career. After that, you're probably going to want to move on and become something like a manager or a director. Me personally, I have my sights on things like a chief data officer or a chief technology officer in the super long run, but that's probably at least a decade or even more long play on that one. So another topic that a lot of people have expressed concern over recently is all the tech layoffs. So that's a perfectly reasonable concern. There's no question that it's ramped up dramatically in the last couple years, and it's affected multiple sectors of the tech space. Crunchbase has a good article on this, and they track the specific companies that have done layoffs. But as of the time I'm recording this video, we've seen 26,569 tech workers lose their job in the US just this year. And that's after 191,000 of them lost jobs last year. Last year, it's literally some of the biggest tech companies in the world driving the ship here. Amazon, Alphabet, Microsoft, Meta, all of them cut 10,000 positions or more. Now this of course begs the question of why and what exactly is going on. There's a good article on KD Nuggets that I think did a good job of breaking this down. And so to understand this, there's a little bit of macroeconomic context. So everybody remembers 2020 and 2021 when the tech industry was having a giant boom and work from home was starting to become such a big thing. That is still something that we've sort of recently been coming off of. But it was followed by people getting laid off since 2022. Now, 365 Data Science dug into exactly why this was going on and where it was occurring. And it turns out a lot of the layoffs fell under the umbrella of HR and talent sourcing. There's also some big buckets around marketing and communications. In particular, that was a pretty big deal in 2022 with X, formerly known as Twitter. But then 22% of these layoffs were people from software engineering departments. So this is sort of interesting. Now, a lot of these job losses are probably due to AI and automation, but some of it is kind of based on a natural business cycle. These companies are done with hiring, so much so that they're actually going in the complete opposite direction. So naturally, some of the people who are going to be first on the chopping block is people who work in the hiring and recruiting and talent sourcing space. As far as the business cycle too, it's important to remember that we had a lot of projections about recessions going into 2022 and also 2023. So that's going to cause businesses to be a lot more risk averse, and in particular, that's going to cause cuts to things like marketing and ads. I think it's also important to realize that we just went through one of the most intense monetary tightening cycles on record. Interest rates in the United States rose from 0% to about 4% in just 2022 alone. When a lot of funding for investment and for funding for research and development for tech companies comes from venture capital and from capital allocations from their stock, yeah, the interest rate issue is clearly going to cause a lot of problems. Now, it's impossible to say for sure what's going to happen in 2024 or in the future. There's current projections that rates are going to come down a little bit in later part of 2024, but you probably shouldn't expect anything like the 0% rates that highly influenced the 2021 hiring spree anytime soon. So now that we've looked at people getting laid off and all that sad stuff, what exactly is going on the other side with hiring? So Interview Query looked into this as of December 2023. So here you've got data jobs in tech companies across the US tracked across 4 categories. Those are data scientist, data engineer, data analyst, and business intelligence jobs. And with most of them, you're looking at only about 50% as many openings as there were about a year and a half ago. Now, interestingly, there's more data analyst positions than data scientist or data engineer positions. Data engineer was the only one that had an uptick in the most recent 2 months, although it's obviously a pretty small uptick. Now, as we start thinking about why data engineering seems to be holding out the best and speculating about why that might be the case, I think it's pretty helpful to think about overall trends in tech as a whole. I found some good research on this from the consulting company McKinsey. They put this report out in late 2023, and most of the data in it goes up through 2022. So it is probably a little bit out of date, but I think it still gives a pretty good picture of what's overall going on. So here's 15 overall trends in tech they looked at. Now, I gotta say, I'm not a big fan of this graph overall because the scales and axes are very hard to read and make sense of. It's ordered from top to bottom in terms of size, not in terms of percentage change, so just bear that in mind. But they had applied AI at the top as far as job postings for fields related to it were concerned. And in next order, we have next-gen software development, cloud and edge computing, trust architectures, mobility, EVs and renewables, and so on. Now, really the only one that they found going down here was the future of bioengineering, which that's pretty fascinating. But what should come as no surprise to anyone is that the one that grew the fastest was generative AI, which that was still small, but it had a 44% growth rate. I talked about this a bit in my recent AI video, but a lot of this is because a lot of companies are making their own generative AI tools. So for all the talk about companies using generative AI to replace jobs, guess what? This is sort of an instance of generative AI creating jobs. Now, this next page of the report is also pretty interesting. Again, take it with a little bit of a grain of salt because it is about a year out of date, but it does speak to a problem that companies often do run into, which is finding the right talent. Here you've got the tech trends on the y-axis, and on the x-axis you've got talent deficit versus talent surplus. On the left in the purple you have skills that are at deficits, and on the right you have skills that are in surplus. So you can get a good idea by scanning up and down this list just to see the sorts of skills that still are in deficits relative to their demand, and that's a lot of skills. So cloud computing comes right up. You can go down and see things like Kubernetes, the Internet of Things, PyTorch, ML, blockchain. I'm kind of surprised Python even made the list, but apparently it did. So while the broader market is experiencing some layoffs, there are still plenty of jobs out there that are trying to hire, but they have a difficult time doing it because it's just difficult to find somebody who meets the requirements they're looking for. So the final question is, what should we take away from all of this? And I think the answer depends on your stage of experience, whether you're somebody who's brand new or somebody who's been working for several years. Well, if you're brand new, you are sort of getting hit in the face with all the weird macroeconomic things which have been happening recently, but you should be at least somewhat encouraged by all the interesting trends and developments that are happening in the tech space. And I think the future, at least in the short term anyway, is quite bright. And while on this channel, I've historically mostly focused on data science related content, there is definitely some evidence building about how robust and important data engineering is. So let's say you're in college and maybe you're interested in or you're currently pursuing computer science. Data engineering might be something you want to look very seriously at. There's a few reasons why data engineering is probably so robust right now. And part of it is because in a lot of companies, you'll have things like data pipelines and modeling pipelines that have been set up maybe even years in the past by other teams. And those things are going to require constant maintenance and improvement. So as long as that's an issue, you're always going to have a need for data engineering. And while you do need data analysts and data scientists to build models and deliver insights, in a lot of companies, that is only as good as the ability to put those things into production. So if that is a requirement, then often that requires a lot of engineering support. But then let's suppose you're somebody with some years of experience in whatever capacity you're working in. What do you do with what's going on in the market right now? Obviously in the market, there's a lot of factors that are beyond your control, but what I always tell people is to learn and to grow your skills as much as you possibly can. That's what's going to open up as many doors for you as possible, as well as give you the most security in the role that you're currently working in, if you have one. I can tell you what I'm doing personally as somebody who comes from a statistics and data science background is I'm trying to grow my own skills in cloud computing and data and machine learning engineering as much as possible. That's why I did things like getting a Google Cloud Professional Machine Learning Engineering certification. Number one, that does increase my security at my current job because I'm able to do more with the things that I've learned, but it also increases the value that I can offer to the broader market. And overall, although we're in this pretty bumpy period recently with a lot of turmoil that a lot of people have personally experienced from layoffs, I would say that the future for people with data-related skill sets is pretty bright. There's tons of jobs out there, and there remains tons of things to learn and tons of work to do. So I'm gonna leave it there. Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, smash the like button. If you disliked it, I guess you're free to hit the dislike button. Then leave me a comment down below and let me know what you think. Tell me what's going on in your own local region. Are you finding that it's booming? Are you finding everybody that you know is getting laid off? Let me know. Then I'll see you all in the not so distant future. Until then, Richard on Data.